Over the next 2 decades, a technological wave will revolutionize the efficiency of farms all over the world. It can't come soon enough. By the year 2050, the human population will be nearly 10 billion, which means we'll need to have doubled the amount of food we now produce. This is an examination of the agricultural innovations coming down the pipeline that will help get us there. The industry has undergone major developments over the last century. 100 years ago, farming looked like this. Today, it looks like this, and tomorrow, it'll look something like this. These changes have allowed many of us to do other things with our lives. In 1900, about 11 million agricultural workers produced the food for 76 million people. Today, just 6.5 million workers feed 321.4 million Americans. 2 factors were most responsible for this surge in productivity: engines and the widespread availability of electricity. Today, the innovations on our immediate horizon include autonomous pickers. UK researchers have already created one that gathers strawberries twice as fast as humans. The challenge will be creating robotic pickers that can switch between all kinds of crops. Robots or drones that can precisely remove weeds or shoot them with a targeted spritz of pesticide, using 90% less chemicals than a conventional blanket sprayer. For the organic farmer, they could zap the weeds with a laser instead. This could have a big impact. The UN estimates that each year, between 20 and 40% of global crop yields are destroyed by pests and disease. Tiny sensors and cameras will monitor crop growth and alert farmers on their smartphones if there's a problem or when it's the best time to harvest. The Bonnie Rob can take a soil sample, liquidize it, then analyze its pH and phosphorus levels all in real time. As a proof of concept for all this autonomous farming technology, researchers at Harper-Adams in the UK plan to grow and harvest an entire hectare of barley without humans ever entering the field. Companies like Ag Robotics have already commercialized software that analyzes drone-captured infrared images to spot unhealthy vegetation. Then, like a real-life game of Sim Farmer, the grower is alerted on their device when a troubled area is identified. Machine learning is regularly improving the system's ability to differentiate between varieties of crops and the weeds that threaten them. Not to be left out, a company called Mavericks contracts 100 pilots to fly light aircraft that are outfitted with multispectral cameras on data-gathering missions over large farms throughout the country. For an even wider view, Planet Labs operates a fleet of CubeSats that take weekly images of entire farms from space to help monitor crops. Other companies are creating analytics software to act as farm management systems, allowing growers of all sizes to deal with this new tsunami of data. And the Farmers Business Network combines data from many farms into one giant pool to give its members the power of macro-level insights that have traditionally only been available to corporate mega farms. Vertical farms are essentially warehouses with stacks of hydroponic systems to grow leafy greens. They're sprouting up in cities all over the world where fresh produce and land is scarce. The key obstacle here is the cost of energy and the toll using a lot of it takes on the environment. The upside is that artificial lights and climate-controlled buildings allow crops to grow day and night, year-round, producing a significantly higher yield per square foot than an outdoor farm. For now, though, only expensive leafy greens like lettuce or herbs like basil have proven profitable in the vertical system. And the jury is definitely still out on whether this is truly an environmentally friendly technique. One possible solution is to use blue and red light wavelengths to optimize photosynthesis and turbo boost growth, a technique tested by researchers at Project Growing Underground, an experimental farm operating in old World War II bomb shelters underneath London. Another advancement in indoor farming is the Open Agriculture Initiative, which aims to create a catalog of climates, so temperature and humidity can be set to recreate the perfect conditions for growing crops that would normally come from all over the world locally instead. This is an attempt to tackle the food miles issue. When produce is shipped around the world, it creates unnecessary CO2 emissions. Just look at where a few of the items you'll eat today were cultivated to understand how big of a problem this is. The millions of people entering the middle class every year in developing countries are demanding tens of millions of pounds of additional meat. These ideas aim to get the most from every animal. Who would have thought Fitbits could be for livestock too? Cows are being fitted with smart collars that monitor if they're sick or if they're moving around more, which is a sign of fertility. researchers at Scotland's Rural College are analyzing cow breath. Exhaled ketones and sulfides reveal potential problems with an animal's diet. Thermal imaging cameras spot inflamed udders to provide earlier treatment to combat a bacterial infection known as mastitis, one of the costliest setbacks in the dairy industry. 3D cameras quickly measure the weight and muscle mass of cattle so they're sold at their beefiest. Companies have even begun positioning microphones above pig pens to detect coughs, giving sick animals the treatment they need a full 12 days earlier than before. Less antibiotics are used if fewer animals become ill for shorter lengths of time. And a system of just 3 cameras developed by researchers in Belgium tracks the movement of thousands of chickens to analyze their behavior and spot over 90% of possible problems. Here's a stat that I found eye-opening. Consumption of farmed fish has now surpassed our consumption of beef, and researchers are working to increase the types of fish that are raised. Aquaculturists at the Institute of Marine and Environmental Technology in Baltimore are developing an artificial ecosystem that mimics ocean conditions so that saltwater fish farms can be built inland. This would allow millions of landlocked people to be able to enjoy fresh fish instead of consuming frozen fish grown or caught on the coast that have to be shipped thousands of miles in refrigerated trucks that use a lot of energy. The most exciting thing about this experimental fish farm is that it's actually a closed system that creatively uses 3 sets of bacteria in different ways so it doesn't produce any waste and even powers itself.
This is the world's most sustainably produced fish. The system is completely and fully contained. There is zero interaction with the environment. There is no waste. It's zero waste goes back to the environment, which is the big problem with aquaculture today.
This revolutionary technique could be critical for saving species in the wild, like rapidly depleting bluefin tuna populations without curbing the appetites of sushi lovers like me. Another ingenious approach from a company in California are proteinaceous fish food pellets made from the bodies of a bacteria that grow by consuming a combination of methane, oxygen, and nitrogen. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that 2 billion people consume insects as part of their diet.
Moi, je mange les insectes, c'est trop nourrissant. Donc, ça nourrit le corps et ça n'a pas de graisse et ça ne nuit pas au corps. C'est un truc que si un être humain mange ça tout le temps, peu rare qu'il aura des maladies.
Bugs are among the cheapest, most nutritious, environmentally friendly sources of protein, so there's a growing movement to find new ways to incorporate them into food products that can be marketed in a way that doesn't gross people out. Some examples are protein powder and insect flour. But even if insects never make it onto many of our plates, they can still help us a lot as animal feed. On the other end of the alternative protein spectrum is lab-grown meat. In 2013, the first hamburger was made from muscle cells grown in a lab in the Netherlands, followed by a meatball grown by a California company called Memphis Meats. These grabbed headlines, but production costs need to come way down before we'll be buying synthetic meats in significant quantities.
So it's better for the environment, and we need much less resources to actually produce it, so that we can produce much more meat with much less resources, so that we can feed the entire planet.
And we'll probably look back at this time as sort of barbaric, that we still killed animals and used animals to such a degree for our meat consumption.
Human survival on Earth has, by necessity, driven us to use and change the world around us. Some of our most powerful innovations are aimed at solving problems we ourselves create. As climate patterns change and human population rises, the prospect of a global food shortage becomes increasingly dire. It's a threat that even the deployment of millions of autonomous farmer bots would be unlikely to solve. But where man-made machines may fall short, bacterial machines may very well prevail, bringing me to the technology that can continue to deliver the biggest increases in crop yield: genetic modification. Scientific breakthroughs like CRISPR, genomic selection, and SNPs now allow single letters within a gene to be precisely edited. Unlike older methods of genetic manipulation, like transgenic modifications that made uncontrolled alterations to large regions of DNA, CRISPR, a gene editing system repurposed from bacteria, more closely mimics the process of random mutation. This process is critical for environmental adaptation, Darwinian natural selection, and, ultimately, evolution. While this fact alone may not placate the most passionate anti-GMO advocate, highly precise techniques like CRISPR should help ease the legitimate health and environmental concerns that have thus far curbed significant commercial investments. But not everyone is sitting on the sidelines. Two large agricultural companies, DuPont and Syngenta, have used genome selection to develop two new drought-tolerant strains of corn called Aquamax and Artesian. Then there's the Next Gen Cassava project, led by Cornell University in partnership with research institutes all over Africa, that aims to, quote, significantly increase the rate of genetic improvement in cassava breeding to unlock the full potential of this staple crop that's central to food security and livelihoods across Africa. Genetically improving the cultivation of other crops that haven't been modified yet could additionally lead to huge yield increases for millet and yams, for example. Rice, one of the world's most important crops, has seen its yield plateau, meaning that, for years now, the maximum amount that can be grown on, say, an acre of land has not increased. The C4 Rice Project, a massive global collaboration between 18 biology labs spread across 4 continents, is trying to change that. Their goal is to genetically engineer a new strain of rice so that its photosynthetic process works more like maize, which would, theoretically, turbo boost its yield by 50%. And of course, it's not just crops. Pig lines, for example, are being altered to make them immune to an illness that costs American farmers $600 million a year. While it's hard to predict which of these developments will have the greatest impact on food production, we should be pursuing all of them. The use of genetic technologies will, inevitably, prove essential for tackling what would likely be an insurmountable challenge, sustainably doubling our global food supply. The good news is that some of the world's most creative scientists, engineers, farmers, and innovators are working on solutions for this problem, even as you watch this video. This piece was based on articles that recently appeared in The Economist and the journal Nature, and our recent video on India's highway mega project led some of you to suggest other projects for us to look into. Your suggestions for video topics are always appreciated. Thanks for watching. Until next time, for TDC, I'm Bryce Plank.
Throughout history, people have had to fight insect pests. To reduce diseases, minimize food losses, protect agricultural trade, or simply to avoid the nuisance of stinging, biting and buzzing bugs. Insect pest control is usually implemented locally in individual fields or properties. However, these uncoordinated efforts often prove inefficient because insects move from host to host, irrespective of ownership. Pest control that is limited to individual localities is both temporary and unsustainable, since it only suppresses a proportion of the targeted pest population. Pests from nearby untreated areas remain unscathed, and thus can re-enter the treated area. The damage continues, and people have little choice but to apply control measures again and again to protect their livelihoods. Area-wide pest management provides a more cost-effective and sustainable approach. It calls for targeting simultaneously the entire pest population and allows the proactive coordination of control measures when the pest is most vulnerable, rather than reacting when it nears damage levels. In this way, pest populations can be contained at low levels for longer periods. Having lower pest density also means that pest management methods can be integrated that are less reliant on insecticides, such as beneficial insects and sanitation, and that address ecological and environmental concerns, such as insects becoming resistant to pesticides. Another such method is the sterile insect technique, which is a species-specific type of birth control for insects. The technique relies on rearing, sterilizing, and then systematically releasing male insects, which seek out and mate with fertile wild females that, as a result, produce no offspring. Area-wide pest management requires the active and informed commitment of numerous stakeholders and even of whole communities. Only through this commitment is it possible to achieve the effective, sustainable and environmentally friendly control of insect pests needed to ensure global food security, prevent disease and protect our environment.
Droughts have been a scourge on our planet throughout the ages, hitting people where it hurts most by depriving them of food and water. They are a devastating natural disaster, causing over 11 million deaths since the 1900s and affecting a further 2 billion people. Droughts also hurt economies, costing an estimated $6 to $8 billion every year and threatening gains in food security and poverty reduction. Much of the damage is done to agriculture, which bears up to 80% of the economic cost of droughts in developing countries. Africa is particularly vulnerable. Between 2005 and 2014, there were 84 droughts in 30 countries across the continent. In 2017, droughts continue to hit countries such as Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia. Climate change is already intensifying droughts and increasing their frequency across the globe. The traditional response of providing emergency assistance is not enough. To meet the Sustainable Development Goals, the world needs to move faster from a crisis-led response to a proactive approach that reduces impacts, builds resilience, and allows people to cope with drought. Integrated soil and water management practices can conserve soil moisture and allow some food production to continue in droughts. Connecting vulnerable farmers to information and technologies such as early warning systems, drought-tolerant seeds, and water efficiency tools can help plan and prepare. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development provides an opportunity to make proactive disaster risk reduction an integral part of efforts to meet these targets. FAO works on increasing the resilience of livelihoods to threats and crises. Everyone has a role to play, from the policy to the community level, to avoid drought becoming famines and to ensure no one is left behind.
Romaine. Mary Ellen Taylor sells her produce at weekend farmers markets near Washington, D.C. The heads of lettuce, still attached to their roots, are popular, and she has many regular customers, like Betsy Kulik.
The lettuce just tastes fabulous. That we can come year-round, even in January, February, and March. Her lettuce is very green and tastes just as good then as it does in the summer.
Taylor grows the lettuce and other salad greens on her family farm in Loudoun County, Virginia, about 80 kilometers from Washington.
Isn't this beautiful? I mean, it is so clean, no sand or soil or pests down in there. It is just like a perfectly formed green rose that's edible.
Taylor harvests 4,000 of those in her 2 hydroponic greenhouses each week all year round. That's why she named her farm Endless Summer Harvest. She has a dozen part-time employees and frequent visitors from around the world.
Several weeks ago, investor group from Botswana came to visit with us. We have had farmers from Afghanistan here that we're visiting because this would be ideal controlled environment to bring to Afghanistan where the climate is so harsh.
The hydroponic crops here are protected from the harsh elements from planting to harvest. After they germinate, these little plants stay in the nursery for 2 weeks. Then they're moved to a greenhouse and placed into gutters where they'll grow to market size. They're nourished sustainably using recycled water.
That tank has 600 gallons of water with the nutrients. It continuously flows in and out of that tank after it has gone through the system and all of the plant's roots.
Taylor says the 2 greenhouses take up a little over 1,000 square meters of land, but produce the equivalent of a conventional 5-hectare farm.
We've established that it's so productive on small pieces of land so they can be closer to major metropolitan areas.
So, besides farmers markets, Taylor can sell her fresh produce to specialty grocery stores and local restaurants. Chef Anthony Lombardo uses the hydroponic lettuces in his signature salads.
People are so into buying local food. 90% of Americans eat lettuce every day. And our business, while other businesses are tanking, is just exploding. We are a retail farm phenomena here in America.
Taylor says she enjoys being known as the lettuce lady and is planning to double her farm's size this year.
Endomycorrhiza, along with naturally derived biostimulants like humic acid and seaweed kelp. Like a mother, endo-root soluble knows that a plant is only as healthy as its roots and the nutrients it absorbs through these. By sensing the nature of soil, endo-root soluble forms a protective layer and stimulates the roots. In general, mycorrhiza improves the plant resistance to soil-borne fungal diseases. Its association with plant roots produces chemicals that are either resistant or even toxic to other organisms like bacteria or even other fungi that could attack green plants. It takes carbon from plants and helps the root absorb more phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, etc. by making it available in abundance, thus enhancing the yield of the crops many folds. Better transplant survival. rapid root growth, improved water absorption, environmental stress tolerance, better nutrient uptake, resistance against soil-borne diseases and nematodes.
If you were asked to picture the world's largest treasure, you might imagine a large vault filled with chests of jewels and gold. But the world's largest and possibly most important treasure is buried right beneath our feet. Soil holds massive amounts of organic matter, which increases its ability to store and release the nutrients essential for plant growth. Soil organic matter also increases soil porosity, allowing it to store enough water and air for plant roots. This means soil organic matter forms the basis of soil health and fertility, and so food production. But it carries out another crucial function. It captures carbon from the atmosphere as soil organic carbon. Plants fix organic carbon in soils through debris, roots, and fluids. Soil fauna break down these residues into soil organic matter. Some of this organic matter remains as soil organic carbon. Some is naturally released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. It is when we lose soil organic matter through human activities that we face problems. The degradation of 1/3 of the world's soils has already released up to 100 gigatons of carbon. Yet an estimated 1,417 gigatons remain in the first meter of soil across the globe, almost double the carbon in our atmosphere, and dozens of times the levels of man-made emissions each year. It is clear that losing the soil carbon treasure would increase carbon emissions and accelerate climate change. But we can do something about it. Many physical and biochemical mechanisms protect soil organic matter from decomposition. Soil management practices influence these mechanisms and can bring carbon gains or losses. Since soil organic carbon is highly dynamic, We need to find innovative ways to sequester more carbon by adapting strategies to local conditions. We also need to monitor and report changes in soil organic carbon. And we need to maintain soil organic carbon stocks in vulnerable hotspots. Peatlands, permafrost soils, and black soils are particularly prone to carbon losses. Grasslands store more than double the amount of carbon in all other agricultural areas. Drylands are important because although they have low carbon content per square meter, they cover a large surface area. Scientists have already demonstrated the many sustainable soil management practices that can preserve and boost soil organic carbon. Governments now need to support land users to implement them. This is a huge task, but an even bigger opportunity. We can enhance resilience to extreme events. We can restore soil fertility to provide cleaner water and nutritious food, and preserve terrestrial biodiversity. And by rehabilitating the world's degraded soils, we can remove up to 51 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere. There can be no doubt that joining forces to protect and increase the stocks in the soil organic carbon treasure represents a sound investment in fighting the most challenging environmental issue of our time, our changing climate. Soil organic carbon. Unlocking the potential of mitigating and adapting to a changing climate.
Carbon dioxide is one of the key gases responsible for causing climate change. But healthy soils can be a strategic ally in mitigating and adapting to climate change. This is because soils sequester and hold carbon dioxide, preventing it from escaping into our atmosphere. There is more organic carbon in our soil than there is in our ground vegetation and atmosphere combined. Worldwide, 1,417 petatons of carbon are stored in the first meter of the soil. 456 petatons of carbon are stored in the above-below ground vegetation and dead organic matter. Organic matter plays a critical role in sequestering carbon dioxide. The higher the organic content of the soil, the higher its sequestration potential. However, soil degradation through deforestation, loss of nutrients, compaction, erosion and waterlogging, and urbanization cause our soil to emit greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming and climate change. But if we protect our soils and manage them sustainably, we can combat climate change.